Hi everybody, Chris Schulte here with Greenlight Quilts. I would like to show you how I set up my machine for blanket stitch applique. You could do this with any computerized machine as long as you can control the settings of the width and the length and your needle position. So I set my number 1 stitch on my Bernina, which is a straight stitch. I have it set at 1.0 millimeters and I've moved my needle all the way over to the right. This becomes my locking stitch. Next, I program my zigzag stitch, but I take the zig out of the zag, so I have a 0 width and a 2.7 length. You're going to use whatever length is your blanket stitch. I know in my case it's 2.7. I also move the needle all the way over to the right. And this will become my travel stitch. And finally, I'm going to select my blanket stitch, which is 2.0 millimeters wide, 2.7 millimeters long, and I move my needle all the way over to the right. A lot of people ask me what's the right settings for width and length. I say whatever makes your project look good. But whichever one you choose, the length, you're going to make your travel stitch. Okay, so 1 or straight stitch becomes your locking stitch. Your zigzag stitch becomes your travel stitch. And then you have your blanket stitch. Okay, and then let's take a look next at, now excuse the jiggles, I'm just gonna reconfigure my, so that you can really get a good look at what I'm doing. Okay, I would like, here, just really get a good look. Okay, here we go. So let's take a look at this wonderful open toe applique foot from Bernina. I want you to notice a couple of things. Obviously it looks like an upside down U. But when you're looking at this, look at the little cutout right here. That's where your needle is going to go. So you can run your applique piece right on the inside of this toe and your needle will sink right next to it. I also want you to notice the notches right here on the outside of the foot. That, and it's over here too, it's perfectly level with where your needle is, and I'll show you why that's significant in a minute. And then lastly, if you look underneath, they have like gouged out this shape here, and what that does is it allows your presser foot to go over your stitches and let your stitches easily glide under the foot and out the back. If this were flush and there weren't a carve out, what would happen is your foot would kind of get stopped up on your stitches. So the good folks at Bernina have thought of everything, but be sure if you don't have a Bernina to check your manufacturer and your foot. And there's a lot of information online about the different features of the presser feet. Also make sure you use your regular faceplate. If you use the single hole plate, you're going to break a needle. And then lastly, we're going to make sure that we set our needle so it stops in the down position. Okay, and let's see if we can really get up close. Make this so. All right, so when I start, I'm going to start approximately 1/4 inch away from the circle, and I'm going to use my locking stitch, which is the straight stitch. So notice here that I've put the edge of my applique right on the inside of that toe. I'm going to set it so my needle stops in the down position, and you could pull up your thread if you don't want to have a jumbled mess at the bottom. Okay, so I've taken 5 little tiny locking stitches, and now I'm going to go around the circle using the blanket stitch. And then again, remember I told you about this little cutout thing right here? that's level with your, and you want to point this to the center of your circle. And that makes sure that your little pins kind of go evenly around. Okay, so I'm going to do that really quick. Also make sure when you're doing blanket stitch applique that you lift your presser foot up and pivot. Don't drive. By driving meaning like just steering, it can distort your pieces and you can lose control really fast. But usually I'll take 1 or 2 stitches and then adjust. See, I'm pointing this guy to the center each time I make sure. Okay? So you get the gist. Okay, I'll tell you what, let me just do, I'll go to the end of this petal. Now, if I were doing this for a real black, I would go around the whole thing. But I want to show you, because you don't need to see this part. Okay. Well, you know what? What's that? I don't like extra threads. Are you guys with me on that? Let's just go around the whole thing. I'll try to make it quick. And this is like light thread. You really can't see it super well. Perhaps I should have used some black or something. But you get the gist. Another thing too, if you're going to pivot, make sure you pivot while the needle is sunk on the outside of your applique design. Otherwise, the little stitches become like V's. They don't become... Okay. All right, so I got all the way around. Now I'm going to continue around the leaf shape, which is faster. And you know, speaking of fast, this is definitely faster than doing it by hand, but that doesn't mean you have to be Speedy Gonzales. And sometimes slow and steady wins the race by paying attention. Let me show you how I handle the points. Okay. All right, so I'm up kind of towards the top. There's a couple ways to handle this, but this is how I like to do it. So I'm going to try to sink my needle. I'm going to go up. I'm going to try to sink it right there at the tip. Okay? I'm right at the tip. Now, knowing blanket stitch like I do, if I put my foot down, the thing that's going to happen is the needle is going to go over. And I don't want it to go over. I want it to advance one. So if I want it to advance one, I'm going to select my travel. I'm going to travel 1 stitch, turn it back to blanket stitch, and continue on. A lot of blanket stitch is about knowing your machine 150% and knowing exactly where that needle is going to go and when it's going to do it. And, you know, I still kind of, okay, one more. All right, now I want to sink my needle right at the base of this stitch right here. Go up and down. Okay, pretty close. All right, since I've already done blanket stitch here, it would be redundant to do it again, and it could really mess up the clean look. So now is the time, because I want to move my needle from here to here. So without tying them off, I'm going to travel. So I select my zigzag stitch. And if you program it right and get your needle right sunk where it should be, you're going to run right into the holes that you just created. Okay, now I'm here. I'm going to switch back to my blanket stitch and go around. And just for grins, because you can get more involved. This is why blanket stitch applique tends to be a 3-hour class, because there's different situations. Okay, I'm going to do one more. All right, let's get it right up to the top. Oh, that looks good. Okay. All right, so in lieu of pressing my foot, which will make it go over, I'm going to make it travel 1 stitch. Reselect my blanket stitch and carry on. And for the sake of time, let's just pretend that this is my last little petal. So I'm going to come up here, and let's say that I'm going to finish at the end of this. So come down here, and I'm going to sink. And now it's simply a matter of, if you were to just pull out your piece right now and cut your strings, you would run the risk of your blanket stitch falling off. So I'm going to select my locking stitch, take about 5 to 7 little stitches right along the edge. Nobody will know they're there except you. Now I take it out of my machine, snip my, and then let's look at where I traveled, which is right here. You can't even see the travel. Can't even see it on the back. So anyway, that is how I set up my machine every time I do blanket stitch applique. I hope that you find this to be helpful, and stay tuned for other instructional videos coming your way. Peace out.